And so now we'll look at contribution margin ratio, and unit contribution margin. So the idea of cost volume profit analysis is we're going to look at the relationship between selling price, production volume, costs, expenses, and profits. So if we look at that graph in the lower right, we see the green line for sales and the red line for total costs. So if we look at the first part of the graph before they cross, total costs are more than sales. So technically to that point you would be losing money. If you look at where they cross when sales equal total costs, so that means your revenue equals your costs. So at that point you're breaking even. And then as you go farther to the right, when the green line is higher than the red line, that means your sales are more than your costs, and that's when you're making money. So the more units you sell, sales gets higher than total costs, and you start making more money. But if you only sell a few units and you're on the left side of the graph before they cross, and that's where you are in units, your costs exceed your sales, and you would theoretically be losing money. So some of the decisions we can make with this type of analysis: we could set our selling price. So we know our total costs, we know what our selling price has to be to exceed those costs so we can make money. You know, our product mix. What stuff do we want to sell? We have some things we make more money on than others, but we have to find the balance to be able to make money in it as a whole. Marketing strategies. What do we want to sell? Who do we want to sell it to? Who can we sell it for more money to? And then the effects on cost, changes in cost on profit. So if we want to maybe go to a more sophisticated facility, but it costs a little bit more, what's the effect on our profit? So the idea of contribution margin is it's revenues available to cover fixed costs and to provide income from operations. So contribution margin is your revenue minus your variable costs. And that revenue minus variable cost is the amount of revenue you have to cover your fixed costs. So again, contribution margin, sales minus variable costs. So here we're going to look at a contribution margin income statement. So this is just a different format to build an income statement. So we have our sales, sold 50,000 units, $20 a piece we sold them for. Our variable cost of those 50,000 units is $12 a unit. So we find our contribution margin, or sales minus variable cost, to be $400,000. So that means we have $400,000 to cover our fixed costs of $300,000. Therefore, we have $100,000 left as income from operations. So a popular metric is the contribution margin ratio. And it's also known as the profit volume ratio. So what the contribution margin ratio is contribution margin divided by sales. So contribution margin ratio, sales minus variable costs, which is your contribution margin, divided by sales. So what this tells you is that if you say you have your contribution margin ratio is 1.8, that means you have 8 cents of contribution margin, or you have $1.08 of contribution margin for every $1 of sales. So let's do a calculation. So we have sales of 100,000, then our variable costs, and we calculate our contribution margin. So our contribution margin ratio comes out to be 40%. So that means that 40% of every dollar sold can go towards covering our fixed costs and go towards income from operations. So we can look at our broken out dollar. So our sales is a whole dollar. Our variable costs are 60 cents of that dollar. And then our contribution margin is 40% of every dollar sold. So we can do some analysis from that. So an $80,000 increase in sales volume would increase income from operations by $32,000. So we take our $80,000 in additional sales we think we can get times the 40% contribution margin ratio, which gives us $32,000 we could increase income from operations by increasing our sales. So that $80,000 increase in sales, based on our broken out dollar on the previous slide, 60% of that would go towards variable costs and 40% would go to contribution margin. So below you'll see our contribution margin income statement with the extra $80,000 in sales. And the idea is we increase our contribution margin by 40%, so it goes up to $432,000. We assume our fixed costs don't change, they're fixed. So with the previous sales volume of 1 million and the new sales volume of 1,080,000, fixed costs are still 300,000. So that's where the 32,000 goes all the way down to income from operations. So our unit contribution margin is sales price per unit minus variable cost per unit. So let's use an example. So if sales increased by 15,000 units, from 50,000 units to 65,000 units, first we calculate our unit contribution margin. So we take our sales price per unit less variable cost per unit, and we get $8. So if we take we have our sales, 65,000 units times 20 bucks. Our variable cost, 65,000 units times 12 bucks. And we end up at our contribution margin, which is 65,000 units times 8 bucks, which is our unit contribution margin. So the idea here is to show the relationship between what we've been looking at before and looking at unit contribution margin.